You begin on the cold stone floor, not because you want to, but because there's nowhere else to be. The chair, the only chair, stands several feet away, tall, decorated, guarded. Not just by the centuries flanking its fluted legs, but by centuries of unwritten rules. That chair doesn't belong to you. It probably never will. Your knees feel the strain first, then your ankles, locked in place as though the floor had grown hands. The dust is older than you, older than your village, maybe older than memory itself. And still, you sit there without sitting, because in this hall, and in many like it throughout time, sitting is not a right. It's a privilege, a signal, a claim. You're not the only one. All around you, people stand or crouch or kneel or shift awkwardly on low, legless stools. Their eyes avoid the throne, as if to even glance at it without permission might draw punishment. The one who does sit, when they finally arrive, will settle onto velvet and gold. Not just furniture, but power made tangible. The chair doesn't comfort. It commands. And that's how it's always been. You might think of chairs as mundane things. Every day, everywhere, you've probably passed a dozen today without thinking. The couch. The desk chair. That creaky dining stool you keep meaning to replace. But this is not the story of the chairs you know. This is the story of the ones you weren't allowed to use. The story of who got to sit and who didn't. The story of what sitting said about you. About your body, your class, your gender, your purpose, your role in the world. And that story goes back farther than you might guess. Because long before chairs became objects of convenience, they were objects of authority. Thrones first and chairs second. Long before the swivel, the recline, or the footrest. Before plastic or upholstery or that odd little lumbar pillow you never quite adjust correctly. Before all that, there was the throne, and before the throne, the floor. We begin, as many power plays do, in ancient Egypt. The Nile flows like an artery through a land of gold and stone, and along its banks, civilization rises in symmetrical rows. The pharaoh sits, not because he's tired, not because his feet hurt, but because he is divine. His seat is carved from ebony or gilded with electrum. Papyrus stalks and lion paws curl around its legs. Its very presence tells everyone in the room, this is someone who is above you, quite literally. His officials stand. Scribes may kneel, servants crouch or bow, but nobody else sits. The chair belongs to the ruler, and so does the right to rest. To be seated is to be set apart. You, in this imagined time, are a grain counter in a side chamber. You lean against a limestone wall during long audits, shift from foot to foot as your ink dries. The chair is not your concern. It's the pharaoh's, and even then he only uses it in formal sessions. It's symbolic, ceremonial. Sitting is not about comfort. It's about control. And Egypt isn't alone in this logic. In Mesopotamia, rulers had thrones of their own high-backed slabs with inlaid shells and carvings. In Assyria, chairs meant strength, war, conquest. Stone bas-reliefs show kings sitting while conquered enemies kneel before them, begging from below. You sit to dominate. Others kneel to submit. Simple, visual, effective. And if you're not a ruler, then you simply don't sit. You might have a stool if you're lucky, a woven mat, a rock, but the chair, as we define it now, something with 4 legs, a back, and a seat, is out of reach. It's a fascinating irony, really. The chair, this everyday object that now creaks under pizza eaters and office workers and fidgety students, was once an object of exclusive importance, a status symbol more potent than a crown, because it showed not just who you were, but where you belonged, in the hierarchy, in the room, and in the grand scheme of human worth. And for a long time, your place was decidedly not in the chair. Now that you know your place on the cold, hard floor, let's rise, slowly, humbly, into the slightly more forgiving world of stools. Because if you couldn't sit on a chair, and you weren't royal enough for a throne, you might just be permitted a stool. Maybe a stool was like a whisper of permission. No backrest, no arm support, no carving of sacred falcons or sphinxes. Just 3 legs if you were lucky, and a round disc to perch on, like a bird on a fence, always ready to take off should someone more important walk in. It was the almost chair, a sign that yes, you had some value, but don't get too comfortable. In ancient Greece, stools were everywhere, but chairs? Reserved. In wealthier homes, the klysmos was a beautiful chair with curved legs and an elegant backrest, often made of wood or bronze. But the klysmos wasn't for everyone. Philosophers sat on stones, servants stood, and women, unless they were elite, sat only when instructed. The chair had a gender hierarchy too. In the open squares of Athens, you're likely to see powerful men reclining on benches during a symposium, swirling wine, and debating virtue. But even in this place of supposed democracy, the seating chart reflects social order. Freedmen, foreigners, slaves, they don't sit among equals. Not unless invited, and even then, never at the head of the table. In Rome, things get theatrical. Literally. At public events, the seating arrangement was a visual caste system. Senators sat in marble chairs near the front. Equestrians a few rows back. Ordinary citizens further still. Women, children, and enslaved people, often standing. Always waiting. Even within a Roman home, the curule chair, a folding, X-shaped seat with ivory inlays, was a seat of office, not rest. Magistrates and high officials sat on it to deliver rulings or receive tribute. When not in use, it was put away like a ceremonial sword. Because chairs weren't furniture, they were instruments of power. And if you think that sounds a little too symbolic, consider this. The Latin word for chair, cathedra, is the root of the word cathedral. Why? Because the bishop's authority comes from the seat he holds. His chair is literally the reason the building exists. Now picture this. You're in a Roman villa, a servant, brushing past mosaics that cost more than your life. Your master is lounging on a lectus, a sort of reclining couch used for dining. He doesn't sit at the table, he reclines. That's how high status he is. You, meanwhile, kneel beside the table, or maybe lean quietly against a wall, waiting to be useful. There are no extra chairs for people like you. You might find the contrast ridiculous, or unfair, or just absurdly impractical. But for centuries, that's exactly how chairs worked. They weren't designed with the body in mind. They were designed with rank in mind. The higher the back, the more elaborate the legs, the richer the materials, the more powerful the person. This wasn't ergonomics. This was social geometry. And so, chairs moved slowly across history. From thrones to stools. From sacred seats to symbols of merit. And yet, for the vast majority of people across the ancient world, the chair remained something you saw, but did not touch, because you weren't allowed to sit in it. By the time you arrive in the Middle Ages, you've spent several lifetimes standing, or kneeling, or squatting on rough-hewn benches that creak like offended trees. You've knelt before lords, before saints, before kings and queens who sit on velvet-padded chairs so large they need a name, throne. And if the ancient world was exclusive about chairs, the medieval world is downright theatrical about them. Picture this, a drafty stone hall, tapestries fluttering like flags against the chill. In the center, a great chair of oak and gold sits upon a raised platform. This is not just a place to rest one's legs. It is the axis around which the kingdom turns. The king doesn't just sit, he occupies. The throne is both furniture and performance. It's a pedestal in disguise. You are not on the throne. You are likely not even near it. If you're lucky, you're a noble with a long wooden bench. If you're a peasant, it's the floor again. Dirt, rushes, straw. The occasional stone if it's dry enough. Even at court, not all nobles sit. In Versailles, during the reign of Louis XIV, the right to sit in the royal presence was a carefully guarded privilege. High-ranking women might be granted a tabouret, a low stool without a back, but only after centuries of etiquette warfare. To be invited to sit was like being knighted with upholstery. A courtier's worth could be measured in centimeters of elevation. And what about chairs for ordinary people? There weren't any. Your home might have a bench, or a chest you can sit on when no one's using it for storage. Maybe a milking stool, if you're lucky enough to own livestock. But an actual chair with a back? A thing designed just for comfort, just for you? That's not part of your world. That's for the Lord's manor. That's for the abbot at the monastery. That's for someone with a title. Sometimes you see chairs carried by others. Portable thrones, bishop's chairs, sedan chairs, borne on poles by men whose job it is to never sit. You watch as royals are lifted above the crowds, like deities on parade, while your legs ache and your spine slowly folds into the shape of your labor. And yet, you carry on. Because you've never expected to sit. Sitting is for rulers, for judges, for patriarchs, for people with scrolls and rings and indoor voices. Not for you. You eat standing, you work standing. You sleep in straw, and you rise to kneel at dawn. The chair doesn't belong to your body. It belongs to a class. But change is coming, subtle at first. A few more benches in the homes of wealthier tradesmen. A simple wooden chair in the corner of a merchant's study. A teacher's seat in a small parish school. The idea that not all chairs must be sacred. That maybe, just maybe, a chair could be earned. Through skill. Through service. Through money. The throne still towers over you, yes. But on the edges of the tapestry there are flickers of something new. The idea that seating might not always be a performance. That one day even your weary legs might be granted the luxury of a backrest. But for now, you weren't allowed to sit in this. The Renaissance arrives like a breath of fresh oil paint. Light returns to the canvas, symmetry to the buildings, and a curious kind of elegance to furniture. Carpenters begin crafting chairs with a new kind of ambition, not just for power, but for beauty. But don't get excited. You're still not allowed to sit in them. Now, there are more chairs than before, yes, but they're still distributed by social map. In Italy, the merchant class begins to rise, and with them, the appearance of personal chairs in study rooms and salons. Chairs with arms, even. That's the new flex. Not just a seat, but a place to rest your arms while you think. Unimaginable. You walk through a Venetian home, maybe as a servant or a craftsman delivering something, and there they are, carved walnut chairs with velvet cushions. Some of them even have names. The Savonarola, the Scabello, the dantesca. You don't sit in any of them. You might dust them, you might carry them, but your body is not invited. Over in England, the Tudors are doing something similar. The monarch has a throne, of course, one that probably has more gold than your entire town. But now high-ranking nobles are commissioning their own chairs for reading and dining. The idea of personal comfort is sprouting like a delicate herb in a kitchen garden. Controlled, watched, measured. And it's not just Europe. In Ming Dynasty China, high-back wooden chairs appear in the homes of scholars and officials. They are tall and stiff, more about dignity than relaxation. To sit in one is to display your learning, your family line, your alignment with Confucian ideals. These aren't chairs to slump into. These are chairs that demand posture. Still, most people sit on Kang platforms, floor cushions, or stools. Chairs are admired, respected, even feared in a strange way. The wooden frame becomes a frame of identity. What you sit in says what you stand for. But you're a craftsperson maybe, a baker, a messenger. You crouch, you perch, you lean. You're allowed to exist, but not quite allowed to rest. And you don't complain. Because in a world where sitting still is a status, to even want a chair feels presumptuous. Even in churches, seating is stratified. Rich patrons pay for private pews. Everyone else stands or kneels. The congregation isn't there to relax. It's there to obey, to listen, to look up, physically and spiritually. Chairs are for those whose voices echo from the pulpit. In schools, teachers sit. Students stand or sit on rough benches without backs. Education itself is seated. Authority reclines. Learning balances precariously, often literally, on the edge of a stool. It's strange, isn't it? How something as ordinary as sitting could be turned into a public display. A kind of quiet theater where the chair is the stage and you, if you are not powerful, never get cast. But slowly, invisibly, change is at work. The printing press has arrived. Commerce is booming. And with it, an idea is stirring in the collective wood-shaving covered minds of the world. What if chairs weren't sacred at all? What if they were just useful? You're not there yet, but you're getting closer. The floor doesn't feel quite so permanent anymore. Still, for now, and for a little while longer, you weren't allowed to sit in this. You're standing in the corner of a small, drafty room. Not a palace, not a villa, just an ordinary house with a low ceiling and a window that barely lets in light. There's a table in the center and a few stools scattered around like cautious mice. And in the corner, there it is, a chair, a real one. 4 legs, a backrest, some effort in the carving. It belongs to your employer, not you. But it's closer now. You can almost touch it. By the 17th century, the chair begins its long, slow migration from the elite to the aspiring middle class. Furniture makers start producing chairs in small batches, sometimes even to order. If you are a merchant, a lawyer, or an educated clerk, you might own one, just one. The rest of the household still stands, or leans, or perches. But that one chair, that's the seat of the head of the family. The only chair with a back is often reserved for whoever brings home the most coin or commands the most silence. In dining rooms, there's a new ritual. The head of the table gets the chair. Everyone else? Benches, stools, or nothing at all. And so, the chair becomes a miniature throne again. But this time in miniature kingdoms. In households. In families. You, if you're lucky, work for one of those families. Maybe you're a servant. Maybe an apprentice. You're used to standing. Standing is habit now. You move around the chair like it's sacred. Not because anyone tells you to, you just know. The chair still holds a weight greater than your body. Then something curious happens. Cities grow. Streets hum with trade and filth and news. Coffee houses open. And with them, chairs begin to multiply. Public places begin offering seating, but not for rest. For business, for thinking, for watching, for reading newspapers and pretending to understand them. In coffee houses and salons, to be seated is to perform civility. Chairs become tools of conversation, of politics, of flirting. But not comfort. Never that. These chairs are straight-backed and judgmental. They make you look serious, presentable. They do not invite lounging. They demand it be earned. By the 18th century, in Europe and the American colonies, furniture making is becoming an art and an industry. Designers like Chippendale and Hepplewhite craft chairs so elegant they seem to float. But those chairs aren't for you either. They're for parlors and drawing rooms, for people who never take off their gloves, for people who commission chairs the way kings once did, with their initials carved into them. And yet more homes begin to have them. One by one, families begin to afford a few more. The kitchen chair, the sewing chair, the desk chair. They are still hard, still stiff, still symbols of rank within a household. But they're there. The idea of sitting, of chairs as ordinary things, is starting to feel less scandalous. You still might not sit in one, not unless asked. But you've been in rooms where they outnumber people. That alone is something new. What's funny is how quickly we forget the symbolism once we're allowed to use it. As the chair becomes more common, it sheds its royal robes and starts wearing aprons and soot. It becomes a tool with memory, and all the while it still holds a quiet echo, a whisper of every foot it once stood above, every room it once ruled, every soul it once denied. You're not there yet, but your time is coming. For now, though, you weren't allowed to sit in this. You find yourself in the middle of a revolution, not the loud, fiery kind with pitchforks and pamphlets, but a quieter one made of upholstery, springs, and a growing impatience with tradition. The chair is changing. And for the first time in human history, it's starting to want you back. It's the 19th century now. Steam is pumping through cities. Smoke churns out of every chimney. And in this new industrial world, factories are building more than engines. They're building furniture in bulk. The age of the handcrafted throne gives way to the age of the mass-produced chair. You can walk into a shop, not a palace, not a temple, a shop, and buy a chair. One that no king has touched. One with no lion paws or gilded trim. One made just for sitting. Of course, you still have to afford it, and many can't. But chairs are no longer mythical objects. They are slowly, stubbornly becoming normal. And with normalcy comes something shocking: comfort. The chair isn't just a tool of status anymore. It's beginning to shape itself around the human body. The industrial worker spends long hours on their feet, but now there's a break room. Now there's a stool with a cushion. Now there's a moment where the chair doesn't mean you're a king. It means you're tired. Enter the rocking chair. Once a novelty, now a domestic staple. It's not built for power. It's built for peace. For nursing a baby. For listening to the radio. For watching the evenings settle outside a front porch. It's a chair with motion. And motion makes it feel alive. Then comes the recliner. The ultimate betrayal of everything the throne ever stood for. A chair that lets you lean back, put your feet up, fall asleep with your mouth open. Unthinkable in a royal court. Mandatory in a living room. You sit now. Not just because you can, but because you're expected to. In school, at work, on trains, in diners, in waiting rooms. Chairs become part of the infrastructure of modern life. They're built into everything. And yet, they don't forget their roots. That's the thing. Even as they soften, even as they multiply, chairs still rank people. The CEO has the leather swivel. The intern gets the plastic cube. The guest gets the folding chair. If one's available, the hierarchy hasn't disappeared. It's just been upholstered. The chair is no longer rare, but the best chair is always someone else's. At home, you may now have a dining set. Everyone gets a seat, but still, there's a dad chair, isn't there? An only mom sits there kind of spot. The aura of importance remains, subtly enforced by repetition. No crown needed, just a slightly more padded cushion. And while the chair is no longer denied to you outright, it still tells stories about who you are, about who you were allowed to become. The corner office chair, the judge's bench, the captain's chair on the bridge. These are not just places to rest. They are permissions. They are inheritances. They are declarations. And somehow they all trace back to that first high-backed thing in the ancient hall. The one that looked down at you like a monument. Like a rule. Because even now, in airports, in classrooms, on game shows and boardrooms, you know which chair is yours and which one you still wouldn't dare sit in. Because even now, part of you remembers, you weren't allowed to sit in this. Now that the chair has been welcomed into every home, it wastes no time infiltrating the office. At first, it arrives humbly, a hard wooden seat tucked under a desk, a functional piece. But soon it grows wheels, then padding, then tilt. It evolves faster than most animals. You sit in one now, probably. Not because you're important, necessarily, but because the workplace demands stillness. Productivity has a posture, and the chair becomes a factory for the modern spine. You're expected to remain motionless and focused, your lower back gently disintegrating hour by hour. This is progress. The office chair becomes a new kind of throne. Not because it's grand, but because it separates you from the floor, from the laborers, from the ones who still stand. You've arrived, not at comfort, but at acceptable discomfort. And what a strange transformation it is, from exclusive throne to universal chair, and yet somehow never quite equal, because even among the swivel and foam, some chairs still reign supreme. You know them by their height, their armrests, the ominous hiss of the hydraulic lift when someone dares to adjust it. Conference rooms are laid out like modern parliaments. Head chair at the top, junior chairs down the sides, the folding chair at the end, if you're lucky. And then there's the chair you can't avoid but wish you could, the airplane seat. The airplane seat is a direct descendant of everything cruel and efficient about chair history. It offers no dignity. It barely offers legroom. It's a design optimized for maximum containment of minimum comfort. A return, in a way, to your ancestral place on the floor. Except now, your knees are higher and the tray table mocks you. Still, the chair is everywhere. And not just any chair, your assigned chair. Theater tickets, classroom roll sheets, wedding tables, even jury duty, all list you by number and row. Society has found a way to organize you by seat. You are no longer simply Evan or Jordan or Raj. You are now 24B. You are chair 5 in section D. And somehow, you still know when you're not allowed to sit. The signs are subtle but clear. Do not sit for display only. A rope around a velvet seat in a historic room. A single chair left empty on a stage. A director's chair with a name stitched across the back. These are the last echoes of that ancient rule, the quiet reminder that some seats are not yours. Even in your own home, the dynamic survives. The good chair by the window. The uncomfortable one you give to guests you don't know very well. The desk chair that's been adjusted to the millimeter. The gaming chair that squeaks like a cockpit. The lounge chair you call my spot, even though no one ever really challenged it. Because in every room, in every age, the chair still speaks. Sometimes in gold leaf and velvet. Sometimes in molded plastic. Sometimes just in the way it faces the door. It whispers what the throne once shouted. This is not for everyone. And even now, with chairs piled in thrift stores and lined up in lobbies, a small part of you still recognizes that hum. That soft, upholstered echo. You weren't allowed to sit in this. The chair has made itself at home, literally. There's one in every room now. A chair for breakfast. A chair for reading. A chair for squatting next to the cat so they'll finally sit in your lap and not on your keyboard. The chair has become so omnipresent that it's invisible, taken for granted. And yet, even in this padded age of lumbar support and ergonomic design, the politics of sitting remain. Think about the interview chair, that single chair across the desk, cold and slightly too low, forcing you to look up. It doesn't matter how soft the cushion is, you feel small in it. Temporary. Pre-approved for nervousness. Or the waiting room chair, arranged in tense little herds under flickering lights. Meant to calm, but engineered to limit comfort. Nobody lounges in a waiting room. You perch, you bounce a knee, you look around to see who got there first. Everyone waiting to be allowed, not into the office, but into some metaphorical room where real sitting can begin. And yet, in other places, the chair is freedom. Think of the deck chair, stretching out under the sun, or the beanbag, a chair that deflates so completely it dares you to take life seriously. Think of camping stools, porch swings, the chair that folds out of a van when you just need to stare at a lake. And remember that sitting doesn't have to mean submission, because somewhere along the way, sitting shifted from a symbol of power to a need. We sit at school, we sit at work, we sit to show we're not in the way. And then, after all that, we sit to relax, even though our bodies don't always believe us. There's a strange tension in it. You sit more than your ancestors ever dreamed of. But you're also more tired. Because chairs were once rare, but now you sit so often, it hurts. Sitting has gone from privilege to problem, a public health crisis. Sitting is the new smoking, they say. Office workers stretch and stand and invest in standing desks, treadmill desks, balance balls, spiky wobble cushions. You do everything to avoid sitting until rest becomes revolutionary again. We've gone full circle. In the old days, to be told to stand was punishment. Now, it's a prescription. Your body wants to move. But your chair, your dozens of chairs, beg you to stay still. And still, in subtle ways, you recognize the old rules. You walk into a room and glance around. Which chair has arms? Which one is closest to the power outlet? Which chair is sunlit? Which chair is slightly taller? Which chair is always left open? There's a rhythm to it, a social dance choreographed by furniture, most of it unspoken, but felt, always felt. You choose your seat like your ancestors once did, carefully, instinctively, with a flicker of awareness that not every chair is truly yours. Because deep down, a part of you still carries that echo. Not loud, not sharp, but steady and ancient. You weren't allowed to sit in this. The chair has followed you into the 21st century, wearing memory foam and USB ports, humming quietly with built-in massagers and Bluetooth speakers. It has become almost absurd in its comfort. Ironic, really, for something that was once guarded by kings and chained to protocol. Now, you can buy a chair that remembers you. It molds to your body, supports your lumbar curve, cradles your elbows, cools your thighs. It arrives in a giant cardboard box with instructions and a tiny wrench. And yet, when you sit in it, when you finally sink in, there's still something ceremonial about it, something final. Sitting is still a choice, and not every seat is equal. Some chairs still carry a sense of occasion, the graduation stage, the jury box, the therapist's chair, where you speak because someone else is listening, the barber chair, where you surrender to precision, the high chair, where a child learns they are part of the family, part of the table. These chairs are not about sitting. They are about roles. Even your favorite chair, yes, that one, is more than it looks. It's not just padding and fabric. It's where you read the last few pages of a book you didn't want to end. It's where you sat when you got that call. It's where the cat finally accepted your presence. It's where your body learned to soften after long days. Where you decided not to go out after all. Where you stopped pretending to be productive. Somehow, this ordinary object has become a container for memory, an archive. The longer it stays in one place, the more it absorbs. Not just your shape, but your mood, your seasons, your growth. You rearrange the room and realize that chair can't go just anywhere. It has a place. It feels wrong to put it in the wrong light. It needs the corner, the blanket, the quiet. Because now that you've lived with chairs, now that they no longer belong to emperors and bishops and smug aristocrats in waistcoats, you understand something they didn't. Sitting is sacred, but not because it's rare, because it's yours. Because you choose when and where and how. And yet, even in this freedom, that old hum persists. That whisper in the frame. A little reminder that your comfort is built atop a long, uneasy history. You weren't always allowed to sit in this. So here you are. You're not on a stone floor. You're not pressed into the rushes, crouching beside a throne. You're not leaning against a marble column, waiting for someone else to leave. You're not standing, not kneeling, not perching. You're sitting. And not just anywhere. You're in your chair. The one you chose. The one that doesn't need gold leaf or lion feet or ceremonial guards to prove it matters. Because it doesn't matter to the world. It matters to you. Maybe it's old. Maybe it squeaks. Maybe it's a little too deep or a little too stained or shaped by someone else's weight. Long before it became yours. But now, when you sink into it, the world softens. Your body gets quiet. Your breath slows. And for a moment, there is nothing to earn. No performance to give. No status to display. It's strange, isn't it? How something so simple took so long to become yours. Thousands of years of exclusion, elevation, and design. Thrones on pedestals. Judges in robes. Courtiers negotiating for stools. Rows of nameless students on splintered benches. Chairs passed down, reserved, denied. You weren't allowed to sit. Not until now. But you're here. And your chair doesn't care who you are. It doesn't check your title. It doesn't charge admission. It doesn't whisper that you're not enough. It just offers you a place. A space to be still. To rest, to be human, And in that stillness, you become part of the story. Not the story of power, but the story of peace. Because even if the world forgets the rituals of sitting, even if thrones turn to dust, and boardrooms get replaced by video calls, and dinner tables give way to scattered takeout and couch cushions, the chair remains, not as a throne, not as a rule, but as a quiet agreement. You deserve to rest. You don't have to fight for it anymore. You don't have to prove you belong. You don't have to look over your shoulder to make sure someone more important needs your seat. The chair is yours now. You are allowed to sit in this.